What's up, y'all? You're listening to the Extra Point College Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Carnes, joined as always by my co-host, Daniel Hammock. Daniel, week 2 of doing picks. We're going to finish up the group of 5 teams we chose this week, and then we're moving right on to Power 5. But before we get there, we are doing the Mountain West. Well, we're doing Boise State, and then we're going to do 6 teams from the American.
As you said, Boise State is 30 teams higher on the S&P Plus than anybody else in their conference. So, we're saving everybody the trouble. We'll break down the Mountain West Conference, which is known as Boise State. And then, yes, we got the top teams in the American. So definitely looking forward to this one. And then after this, we're jumping into Power 5. Definitely, you and I both very similar, have a new love for the group of 5 probably the past few years. So we've definitely enjoyed this, but there's definitely levels to it. So we're going to hit the cream of the crop, and then we're getting into our specialty, the Power 5. So
that's right. Hey, let's not waste any time. Let's dive on in. Let's go ahead and check Boise State off the list. Boise State, they lose their head coach, right? So Brian Harsin to Auburn, coming off of a weird pandemic season. I mean, last year coming off of a 5-2 record, 5-1 in conference with a bowl game loss. They bring in Andy Avalos from Oregon. What's the outlook on our Broncos?
Yeah, so famously a few years ago, Hank Bachmeier comes in, highest rated, highest rated quarterback ever in Boise State history. He's had a couple good seasons, so he's back for his junior campaign. Definitely someone I see having another good season. It's difficult because, we had all those years of Chris Peterson, and then basically hands the keys to Brian Harsin, and it was still very much a similar staff. So they had that continuity factor. So this will be a little different. Now, they're still more talented, and we definitely expect them to just kind of keep the train rolling, at least in conference. So that shouldn't be a problem. We do have some questions with them against some of the other, major opponents they play. But, they've got 8 returning starters on offense, 8 on defense. So definitely a good mix there. I think that, something that goes unnoticed is George Halani, their starting running back. He's not counted as a returning starter because he wasn't there in 2020. He opted out. But in 2019, he was a 1,000-yard rusher. And last year, their biggest issue was running the ball. So you got 4 returning starters on offense, obviously your quarterback, couple of receivers, and then a guy that you're not necessarily counting as a returning starter, but I'm going to count him. So that would be 9 returning on offense if you count him. George Halani coming back for his junior year. And I expect big things from this offense. I think that they're definitely going to be more balanced. And they should run roughshod through everybody in their conference. But, we're going to have to see it to believe it for this, Andy Avalos, team. He's a defensive coordinator from Oregon. So defense, we would imagine, is his specialty. We'll kind of see what he brings to Boise.
Boise had the number 1 scoring offense in the Mountain West last year. As you said, they should run through the conference offensively. Defense, they were 6th in scoring defense in the conference last year. And as far as returning production goes, Boise State defensively ranks 122nd out of 127 teams in returning production. But to me, that's where you want to be, bringing in Andy Avalos, because your offense is really good. That should continue to be good. If your defense is the weakness and you're bringing in a defensive head coach that has coached one of the better defense in the country last year in Oregon, last couple of years actually, that should play to their favor. So schedule-wise, out of conference is pretty tough schedule. So they play UCF and Oklahoma State out of conference this year. And, then they have the Mountain West. So we're predicting 93 for Boise State, 7-1 in conference. And we got them losing to, that UCF team opening game of the season at UCF. That should be a fun one, though. That'll be kind of hidden in that big weekend, big opener for week 1. But Oklahoma State, 3rd week of the season. After that, they should roll through their schedule pretty easily.
Yeah, you mentioned that being the opening weekend. I was going to say that it's so funny because that game anywhere else on the season is potentially to get like a big primetime slot. But when you're going to leverage it in with all those other big games, it's just another Labor Day game. So, or Labor Day weekend. So
That's right. And we are picking Boise State to win that side of the conference, win their division. And we're picking Nevada to win the other side of the division. We're not going to dive into Nevada, but Boise State and Nevada out of the Mountain West. Let's move on to the American, the Power Six, the American Conference. And we will start with the returning champs. And we didn't even mean to do that. This is alphabetically through the 6 teams we picked, but Cincinnati, Luke Fickell, again, depending on who you ask, turned down a couple jobs this past offseason to stay at Cincinnati. They do lose their defensive coordinator, Marcus Freeman, to Notre Dame. Defense was very good last year. This is a team that went toe-to-toe with Georgia in the Peach Bowl, was the Group of Five darling from this past season, undefeated regular season, close loss to Georgia in that Peach Bowl. Are we expecting a drop-off from Cincinnati, or are they going to, business as usual?
Yeah, so for me, I mean, I have them as a potential step back candidate, but what does that even mean? Because a step back could be losing one more game than they did the year before, could mean the same record, just not quite performing. Obviously, they returned Desmond Ritter. He's their all-everything quarterback. He's their leading returning passer and rusher. So definitely a dual threat, a guy that's actually going to be up there on some NFL big boards. Definitely saw a lot from him last year. The schedule's pretty manageable this year outside of a couple of, Power 5 games that they're going to play. The team themselves, they got 6 returning on offense, 6 on defense. So definitely something to keep an eye on there. But I really, I think that this team, Luke Fickell, he's losing Marcus Freeman, his DC to Notre Dame. He's always been a defensive guy himself, so I don't think they're going to take that big of a step back. And if you look at the stats for the conference, not only were they by far the number one in scoring defense, but almost by 2 touchdowns against everybody else. Like the other top 5 were all in like the 30-point range, and they're in like the 15-point range. So that's going to be the biggest difference for them. The defense is going to suffocate these other teams on the schedule. And then Desmond Ritter, he's going to be enough for them on offense.
Yeah, defensively, they went into that Peach Bowl with Georgia ranked, number 2 in the country in SP+. Defensively, Georgia was 1. So great defensive team. We expect them to be the same there. You mentioned the schedule. I mean, they've got 2 really tough out-of-conference games, and they're back-to-back. They go at Indiana and at Notre Dame. Now, if they win either of those games, there will be a lot of discussion about if they were on the table, like, are they deserving? If they win both of them on the table, you got a really strong argument because they finished undefeated last year,
right?
Went toe-to-toe. Like, and that's the formula to me. If a Group of 5 team is ever going to get in, it's got to be you ran the table the year before, either won like UCF did, or you went toe-to-toe like Cincinnati did with Georgia last year. You come back for a second time. You run through your schedule, beating a couple Power 5 teams. And at that, these will be 2 top 25 teams that they're going to be playing in Indiana, Notre Dame. But we are picking Cincinnati to take, I don't even know if you call it a step back because the schedule is more difficult. We're picking them to go 10-2. We're not picking them to win either of those games with Indiana or Notre Dame, but running through the American, 8-0 in the American. And, that would put them first in the conference. And the American does best 2 teams, similar to the Big 12, go to the championship game. And this will put them right back in the American championship game and, playing with a New Year's Six bowl.
Well, and like what you were talking about, their 2 toughest games, Indiana and Notre Dame, not only are they back-to-back, they're both on the road. And so in a way, not that you're ever going to go into a game and say, oh, we don't care about this game. They're going to care about the game. But in a way, it doesn't matter because both of those are already kind of tabbed as losses. So them being on the road, it doesn't matter. But they're tough in conference games like UCF. That's at home. Tulsa, that's going to be a tough out, we think. That's at home. These types of games, SMU, they're playing them at home. So that's really big when you're looking at more of your peers. When you're playing someone who you really need that home field advantage, they're going to get it. So that's another reason we feel really strongly about it.
Let's move on to the Houston Cougars. Now, Houston is a weird case. I do want to mention real quick, win totals for Boise State is at 9. Cincinnati is at 10. So sorry that we're being lazy and picking the push,
We're
but
pushing.
looking at the schedule, that's what we think. Houston, Dana Holgerson, 2 years ago, the 2019 season, that's when like they had half the team opt out. Derek King opts out, just saying he's saving his year of eligibility, transfers out to Miami. And then right after that, you get the COVID year where Houston had like 4 or 5 games canceled, like because the other team had COVID issues. So really hard to get a read on them. They were 3-5 last year, but again, like 4 games canceled on them.
Right.
So hard to get a read on them after a 4-8 record in 2019, a 3-5 record last year. I mean, how are we feeling about Houston?
First of all, it's Houston. All right. If you talk to anybody in Middle Georgia, they're going to tell you Houston.
It's not a Houston house.
Yeah, you live in a house, not a Hughes. But Clayton Tune at quarterback, he kind of took over for Derek King, and then last year, amidst all the cancellations, he still threw for over 2,000 yards in just 8 games. So I think that he's going to be what Dana Holgerson likes in this offense. But I mean, they're kind of, defensively they return 9, offensively they return 7. Like you said, it's very difficult to read them. Are they going to be this Houston that we don't expect them to be this, but the Houston that, had Greg Ward and, beat Florida State in the Peach Bowl a few years back, more than a few years back, probably like 2016. Or are they going to be more of kind of what we've seen the past couple of years where, they're a little bit down. They're high scoring offense, kind of that Big 12 model, where they score a bunch of points, but, give up a bunch of points so their differential is negative. So I could kind of see that being the case. Their schedule, they have some, some easy, not necessarily easy games, but they have, some hills and some valleys. So, we're kind of they're at the mercy of their schedule is really where we're at with them. We don't really know what to think, because all those cancellations last year. So, I mean, you'd rather have your returning starting quarterback. I'd take it, Other than that, defensively, you've got some guys back. They got their returning sack guy back, David Anady. He's a senior, so we'll see if getting after the passer is something that they can do on a regular basis. They did lose Peyton Turner to the NFL last year, so this is the guy that kind of steps into that role.
Houston's win total set or date, we're going to go slightly under here. We're going to go with a 7-win season for Houston. This is one of the picks I feel one of the least confident in. It's just hard to get a read on this team. I'll be excited to watch them for sure. I mean, this is a team last year that increased their yards per play by just over a yard, which is impressive to do year over year. They're one of 5 FBS teams to increase their yards per play by a yard from 2019 to 2020. So there's some hope there on offense. When Houston's been its best, it's had a fiery offense, especially under those Tom Herman years. So 7-5 for Houston, 4 losses in conference. They get Texas Tech out of conference, but hey, they can win that Texas Tech game. I'll have to see it to believe it. Let's move on to.
They should be playing for a spot in the Big 12. If Texas Tech loses, they get dropped to the American, and if Houston wins, they're in the Big 12.
Relegation.
That's what we should do.
Houston would fit in the Big 12 anyway.
Right.
So
they've already got that Texas culture.
That's
and the whole thing. Yeah.
Major city, So let's move on to Memphis. Memphis, they had Mike Norvell. They go 8-6 in 2018, 12-2 in 2019. He gets hired to Florida State. They go 8-3 last year. Again, COVID year, hard to tell. But Memphis, perennially one of these group of 5 teams that's contending for New Year's 6 bowls. They went to the Cotton Bowl with Penn State, played a classic just 2 years ago. Here we are, win total set or date. What's your thoughts on Memphis?
Yeah, so it's tough when you lose 3 guys like DeMonte Coxey, Kenneth Gainwell, and Brady White from your offense. It's not just, losing some, starters or losing this or losing that. They've got 7 returning starters on offense, 9 on defense. But, Kenneth Gainwell, I mean, he obviously got drafted in the NFL at running back. I mean, he's this explosive back. You've got Coxie is just a very, reliable receiver, downfield threat. And Brady White, you have a starting quarterback for 3 years, 4 years, whatever it was. And, you got to rely on those things and you got to kind of count on them. Jacob, I think you and I are very similar in that we really believe in Mike Norvell. And then obviously he leaves for Florida State and you're wondering what, Silverfield's going to do. But he at least had all this returning production. So we really felt confident that at least for 1 year, they were going to have that continuity where they're going to still be, a force. And they were 8-3 last year. It's a solid season. We're kind of thinking similar to that. Now, one guy that they've got, Calvin Austin III. I mean, he had a big year last year, over 1,000 yards receiving. And he's actually technically the returning passing leader as well because he's got the only completion on the books. So that's actually pretty funny. But yeah, he's got 63 catches and over 1,000 yards. I really see him being a big deal for them this year. I'm not sure if it's going to amount to a bunch of wins. I do think that they've kind of got that pedigree, kind of like what we talked about with App State last week, where just as a program, they're used to being, kind of the big dog. They're not going to be that alpha in the conference this year like they weren't last year, but I think that they're going to win the games they're supposed to win.
Yeah, that's where we're at. Like they should win the games they're supposed to win and lose the games they should lose. So out of conference, they do get an SEC school, Mississippi State. They play at UCF and SMU back to back. We're calling all those as losses as well as at Tulsa, which we'll talk about in just a few minutes. So 8-4 for the Tigers. Sorry that it's another push. 3 out of 4 pushes so far and 1 under. But I feel some overs coming. Let's go to SMU. So
yes.
These are Daniel's ponies. I mean, for 2 straight seasons, we've been riding the ponies.
Yes.
The SMU Mustangs, Sonny Dykes, but hey, losing their QB. Now you're without Shane Buechele, but you bring in former Oklahoma and former West Virginia. He went to West Virginia, right? No, that was Austin Kendall. Sorry. Former Oklahoma
no, you're good. I thought
quarterback Tanner Mordecai.
Yes.
Just Oklahoma. That was Austin Kendall with West Virginia. Anyway, Tanner Mordecai comes in at quarterback. So you bring someone with experience, someone that, hey, Lincoln Riley, who knows a thing or two about quarterbacks, recruited and wanted on his team, now on the roster to replace Shane Buechele. The Ponies, their win total is at 6. So, Daniel, how are you feeling about that win total?
That's bogus is what it is. Look, all right. 3 words. Ulysses Bentley IV. All right. This dude, he's the best back in the conference. All right. And I mean, he's got an NFL future. Averaged over 5 yards a carry last year, but only 913 yards. I expect him to have 1,200 this year, 1,300. I think he's going to have a big, big year. One of the reasons why, 5 returning starters on offense, on the offensive line, 9 returning starters overall. Yes, they returned their 3 top receivers. So Tanner Mordecai kind of coming into a good situation. Sonny Gray running that offense and just the team in general, but running that offense to where, they really have a good mix of run and pass on that spread that they run. Defensively, they got 7 returning starters. 3 out of 4 defensive backs, which I think that's probably the most important thing in a conference like this that's like very wide open. So yeah, I'm just really high on them. I think that the little, the unknowns that we have about Tanner Mordecai, all we need to know is, does he have an arm that can, get it there? And if he was recruited by Lincoln Riley, like you said, that kind of gives a stamp of approval. And it's all indications are that he's going to be the starter. I'm looking at the schedule and like what you're about to go through. It just seems like they're better than a lot of these teams on here. And this conference specifically, the only one that's a little different is Cincinnati, where they have a little more defense than everybody. Everyone else, they're driven by that offense. And it looks like SMU is going to have basically all their guys back. So, I'm definitely looking forward to watching these guys in motion.
We haven't talked about UCF yet, but I think there are a few tiers in the AAC. I think Cincinnati, you could argue, is on their own tier right now, but I think UCF you could put up there on that tier with the talent they have and with Gus Malzahn now. That second tier, I mean, you got to go like SMU, Memphis, and
Tulsa.
I mean maybe Memphis, and then Tulsa.
Yeah.
And so if you're giving me 6 the win total, I'm gonna go over. Like this so far, the games we picked, this is our best bet for win totals as far as difference in games between what we're picking them to win and what their win total is. We're picking SMU to go 9-3.
Right.
And out of conference, they have 3 relatively easy games against Abilene Christian, North Texas, and at Louisiana Tech. North Texas will get, they're formidable. They're a formidable opponent, but then they get at TCU, and that's become a fun rivalry since they're just across town from each other.
That's the Protestant Bowl, the Methodists versus versus Christians.
So, they should lose that TCU game. We're pretty high on TCU. And then we have them losing to Memphis and Cincinnati. They do go, they get Tulsa at home. They go to Memphis, but it's just, it sets up well for them in the schedule to go 9-3. We believe in this team. I think of the teams on that tier, they have the best quarterback in Tanner Mordecai. This is a former 4-star and highly rated. This is an offense that allows the quarterback to thrive, especially when you have a good running game to back it up. So we're high on SMU, 9-3, best bet so far as a win total, if you want to capitalize on that.
And how about, Sonny Gray, the position he's sitting in, just in general, like he's going to be able to get these guys that are bouncing back from these. Like he just got a Texas one and Shane Buechele, ran him for 3 years. And then now he just got Tanner Mordecai from Oklahoma. I mean, those guys keep recruiting enough talent. You can keep with the transfer portal. You can keep doing that. This is sustainable for him if he wants to, because SMU being in Dallas, I mean, you're going to have access to talent. You're probably going to have guys just running wild all over the place. So being able to get a stable quarterback, I feel like is going to be, regular business. He's going to set up shop there.
I'm just impressed that Sonny Gray can go from pitching from the Reds to coaching SMU.
Sonny Dykes. Sonny Dykes.
I know.
Thank God you called it out. Oh.
I was like, I did have to look up. I was like, who's he pitching for now? I was like, I gotta call this out. No, you're 100% right.
I should know my own ponies, but be that as
being out of Dallas, it's similar to the position Miami's in,
right?
Where it's like, except they're the group of 5. So it's like, hey, if things don't work out at this other big school in the Big 12, come on home to Dallas. Like,
yeah, most of these guys are probably from somewhere close to there. So it's like, just come on back. I am curious
where Tanner Mordecai's from. I'm going to look it up. While we're doing that, though, we are going to move on to Tulsa. Tulsa coming off of, their best season in recent memory, and he is from Waco, Texas. Tanner Mordecai is. So there you go.
Hour and a half out of Dallas right there.
Yep. So Tulsa coming off of a 6-3 season, and that's after going 3-9 and 4-8. We thought it was 6-3. Had some ridiculous players, including Zaven Collins, went very high in the draft. And, coming off of that, can they follow it up? That's the question. Returning production, they do rank 109 in the country. But, is this sustainable? Can Tulsa sustain what they did last year?
This year, we'll definitely have to see. They were a team that you and I kind of went back and forth on. We have them very similar to SMU. So that's kind of, one of those games that we had circled that was like, hey, this one's going to be a real good aptitude test between these two teams. But 9 returning starters on offense, similar to SMU, 10 on defense. Really, namely, just losing Zaven Collins, who was a first-round pick in the NFL draft. So that was really impressive. Now, we do have a Caleb Evans, the starting cornerback listed here. He is graduated and he is in the transfer portal. So it does look like he's probably going somewhere potentially in the SEC. There's some big schools that have offered him. And so he may be, he's most likely leaving. He's got 2 years of eligibility. So I said 10 returning on defense, more like 9, but hey, that defense was a unit last year. They've kind of overperformed the past 2 years, really. So last year, being 6-3, they were right there in it all the way till the end. Shamari Brooks looked great at running back. Now, Davis Brin, he was the third string quarterback last year, but he came um, in a fourth quarter comeback versus Tulane last year. So he's definitely got some playing experience. I think he's going to be good enough, especially for them to, not take a full step back. But I mean, they're going to play a full complement of games, so we definitely expect them to go over that win total that they had from Vegas. But good season nonetheless, and they've got the teams that we have them losing to, they should lose to. Basically, they're going to beat the teams they're supposed to beat.
Yeah, Tulsa also has, as far as the group of five goes, probably the hardest out of conference schedule of anybody.
Right.
They go to Oklahoma State, followed by a trip to Columbus to play Ohio State. So,
Right.
I mean, those are two losses. But outside of that, we got them going 6-2 in conference again.
Yeah.
Like you said, that they should beat the teams they should. And then, you got Cincinnati and SMU on the schedule. SMU's away on the road that last week of the season, and we like SMU a little more there. But 8-4 for Tulsa seems right. And hey, that win total is at 6.5. So a game and a half above where we think it should be. And hey, we're hopping all aboard Tulsa to sustain what they've been doing. This is Phil Montgomery's 7th year at the school, and he's turned it around, built a winning program. And speaking of head coaches that we love, all aboard the Gus bus. I mean, you're talking UCF went out and just robbed the head coaching market. And I mean, I think they have a better head coach than Auburn and Tennessee. I think they upgraded their head coach.
Yeah. And honestly, not to downplay the head coach, but I think his job of hiring a defensive coordinator, Travis Williams, he was a guy, I mean, he's legitimately this big time recruiter, and he's an up and comer. He's been Auburn's linebacker coach for the past several years. I believe he played at Auburn. He's been one of their major recruiters. Auburn's been recruiting at a high level. And then he's co-DC. He did all kinds of stuff like that. But he had basically accepted a linebacker position since Gus got fired. He accepted a linebacker coach job at Miami, which, nothing to snuff at, but that was Gus's first call when he got the job at UCF was, hey, I need to get a DC in Travis Williams. So definitely impressed by that hire alone. They got 8 guys returning on offense. Dylan Gabriel is going to be most notable. This is his 3rd year at the school. Obviously he's from Hawaii. He's got 5 returning offensive linemen. His 2 top receivers. I mean, I think he's just kind of ready to keep rolling. It's going to be interesting, Jacob. We've seen Gus Malzahn go with a running quarterback, him with a passing quarterback. We'll have to see how this meshes. Obviously, he's got a stud, and he's a good coach himself. So we're going to see what happens. But defensively, I just mentioned Travis Williams. He's got his work cut out for him. He's only got 3 technical returning starters, but one of the guys that's not listed as a starter, Devod Wilson, famously, he's that transfer from Georgia. I think he's got a lot of high upside. I think you could see him pop this year as a major guy, kind of stepping in that Richie Grant role. Richie Grant obviously just went to the NFL draft, drafted by our Falcons. But someone else I want to call out that UCF has is Kennesaw State linebacker Bryson Armstrong. He All-American linebacker for 4 years. He graduated as a graduate transfer. He's using that extra year, and he's coming down to UCF to play linebacker for them. So excited to see what he might be able to do in this defense. But, they've all around got a good team. And like you said, they might be on that top tier alone with Cincinnati.
Did you mention Big Cat Bryant?
I didn't even realize oh my gosh. Yeah.
So like you said, defensive returning production was not high, but you bring in some studs from other SEC schools.
Right.
And To me, man, Gus looks happier. I mean, there was the joke in the initial press conference about the pressure cooker of UCF, and I'm like, he just came out of Auburn, like where Nick Saban is your rival. Don't talk about pressure.
But did you see that guy ended up buying him an Instant Pot?
Yep.
And saying, "Here's your pressure cooker."
Brilliant.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
beautiful.
Love that. So, look, I mean, it's documented. I don't think this. It's true. In 2017, UCF went 13-0. The next year, that was, Scott Frost gets hired, rides off into the sunset as, a national champion. And 2018, they go 12-1. Like it or not, that's a 1-game regression. 2019, 10-3, 2 more games back. 2020, 6-4, another game back. They regressed under Josh Heupel. No longer. In comes Gus Malzahn, and he's calling plays. He said he's never again in his career not going to call plays, but he does have 2 co-offensive coordinators. And I thought this was interesting. Tim Harris Jr. was the running backs coach and co-offensive coordinator at FIU. And so you get a guy who's connected to South Florida, who knows the players down there. They had a very heavy run offense. Then you bring in G.J. Kinney, who, career backup in the NFL at quarterback, but I mean, he was an offensive analyst for SMU with Sonny Dykes, Arkansas in 2018 with Chad Morris. Chad Morris both times, not Sonny Dykes at SMU. That would have been Chad Morris both times.
Right.
With the Eagles, where he played in 2019, he was an offensive analyst. And then he was the Hawaii offensive coordinator and QB coach last year. So 32 years old, young guy. So it's like he has a guy who's like big run guy, big pass guy with his offensive coordinators. I thought that was interesting. But this UCF offense will look different. But I think with Dylan Gabriel's legs, you should see him take off as a quarterback. And we're picking 10-2 for UCF. Their win total is set at 9.5. So we're going just above that at 10-2. And this puts them, we're having them lose to Cincinnati in the regular season, but hey, this puts them in a rematch for that American Conference Championship game. So we're picking Cincinnati and UCF to come out of the American, and we will get a rematch in the American Conference Championship. We'll see who comes out on top.
With the best 2 quarterbacks in
the conference.
It's going to be the best 2 quarterbacks, best 2 coaches. So it's like what we always say about the group of 5. Like, if you just get those areas right, it's really going to take you a long way.
I could see UCF also, like they could run the table.
Yeah.
Like their schedule's easier than Cincinnati. Anyway, but we're picking 10-2. Gus has a loss in him somewhere. So, hey, we ate our vegetables. We love the group of 5, but next week, the ACC Atlantic, the Clemson Tigers, the Louisville Cardinals, the NC State Wolfpack. But Daniel, to listen to those episodes, you got to be following us.
Best way to do that, follow us at the Extra Point Pod on both Instagram and Facebook. You go there, find the link tree, find us on YouTube, subscribe, because we really don't know how to get there otherwise. All right. You've got to go that way. And then, hit the notifications bar so you get notified when we post a show. That's going to help us bring the best content to you possible. Obviously, we're on Apple, we're on Spotify, all the places. So go subscribe there. All the places, any place you can listen to it. Google, Stitcher, all of them. Go there. I don't know why you'd have them, all of them, but do what you need to do. Leave us a 5-star review. That helps us get recommended on Apple. So do that. Put a question in there, comment if you want us to make sure we mention something about your favorite team. I mean, we got all the Power 5 coming up, so I'm sure we got a bunch of people who are fans of certain teams we're going to be discussing. So, mention something there. And then obviously follow us on Twitter at Jacob Carnes with a K, at Deep South Daniel, the way it's spelled.
That will do it for this edition of The Extra Point. He is Daniel. I am Jacob. See ya.